Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc Podcast with hosts Waldo Wachewski and Ophelia Brewski.
All right, so are you ready for this? Today we're doing a deep dive into a listener's dating dilemma, and it's a good one. Really got us thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of those situations where like the date's going really well, sparks are flying, amazing conversation, like the whole 9 yards.
Okay, sounds promising so far.
Right, but then it takes this unexpected turn, like totally unexpected. So this listener, they wrote to the Luv Doc.
Oh, the Luv Doc.
Yeah, our resident advice guru with like a heart of gold, but also a super healthy dose of skepticism.
Right. Always keeps it real.
Exactly. Okay, so get the listener's question is basically, what happens when a guy, and this is the kicker, doesn't try anything on the first date?
Wow. See, now that is interesting. It's like it goes against everything we think we know about dating, especially these days. It makes you wonder, what's the reason behind that?
Right. And our listeners totally thrown off, which is understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
part of you wants to celebrate, like maybe chivalry isn't dead after all.
Yeah.
But then there's this other part, and it's like, wait a minute. What? Is this a red flag?
Yeah.
Is there something they're hiding?
Yeah, like, is this the beginning of a true crime podcast or something?
Exactly. And, you guessed it, the Luv Doc dives right into all those possibilities. And they do it in their signature style.
Oh, I know what you mean with that humor.
Yes. Like, they're analyzing everything from the guy's taste in music. Apparently, a large vinyl collection is now suspect.
Right, what?
To his choice of restaurant for the date.
Okay, we're definitely going to have to unpack those theories because what's wrong with vinyl?
Right. I need more details there. But before we get totally lost in all the hilarious details, I think we need to talk about what's really at the heart of this dilemma.
Yeah. What about it?
Well, it really speaks to how anxiety-inducing modern dating can be, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. This situation, it's like it perfectly captures all those uncertainties we're always dealing with when we're trying to figure out what someone's true intentions are.
Right. It's like the classic too good to be true scenario, and it makes us all a little apprehensive,
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, we're kind of conditioned to expect a certain level of, let's call it forwardness, especially on that first date.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when someone breaks the mold, goes against that script, it throws us off balance.
It's true. It really is.
Which is where the Luv Doc's advice, I think, is really insightful, even if it comes wrapped in humor.
What'd they say?
So they start talking about all these variables at play in any dating situation.
Variables. Okay, I like where this is going.
Right.
So what does the Luv Doc mean by that?
Well, they're essentially saying that we need to remember that there are tons of reasons why someone might act a certain way on a date.
Okay, yeah.
And that instead of just jumping to conclusions, we should consider, like, all the possibilities.
Makes sense.
So instead of just looking at the surface, we've got to dig a little deeper. So we're back to this guy who seemed like the perfect date.
Yeah.
But then didn't, make a move.
Right, and it's so easy to go down that rabbit hole of like, what are the red flags? What's going on?
Yeah.
But I think the Luv Doc brings up a good point about taking a more, like, methodical approach.
Yeah.
So they kind of walk us through, a bunch of possibilities. And they start with, well, let's just say the more dramatic scenarios.
Dramatic how?
Like, could he be secretly married?
Oh, juicy.
Or living a double life?
Okay.
Or, and this is where it gets really good,
Okay.
the Luv Doc throws out this idea, maybe he's just really, really committed to keeping his mid-century modern apartment looking like a museum.
Okay, wait. I have to admit, that one made me laugh. Like, is this guy a secret agent or just really obsessed with keeping things spotless?
Right. Exactly. And, I think that's the genius of the Luv Doc's advice.
What is?
Well, even with the humor, they're getting at something really important. When we see something that doesn't fit our expectations, we try to make sense of it. We can't help it.
Totally. We're always looking for answers, trying to find a reasonable explanation, especially in the dating world.
And sometimes, like you said, it sends us down these crazy rabbit holes.
Okay, so true. Speaking of rabbit holes, this feels like a good time to bring up the infamous chili parlor incident.
Oh, yeah. The chili parlor. Had to come up sooner or later.
For anyone who hasn't experienced this Austin institution.
Which, how is that even possible?
I know, right? But anyway, it's like a rite of passage.
Right.
But what does chili have to do with our listener's date?
Well, here's where the Luv Doc really shines.
Oh, so?
Because they somehow managed to connect these two seemingly random things. Like, they create this whole elaborate story about how a big bowl of chili from the chili parlor, and we've all been there, can make a person, well, let's just say, a tad lethargic.
Okay.
And that maybe that's why the date didn't end the way our listener expected.
Okay, I have to admit that's pretty funny.
Right.
And so, typical Love Doc, but even if it's a joke, it makes you think about expectations. Like what we think should happen versus what actually does.
Exactly. And how much of that is influenced by, like, our culture, these unwritten rules we all seem to follow.
Wow, I've never thought about it that way before.
But it's true, isn't it? We bring all this baggage to every interaction.
We totally do, and we don't even realize it half the time.
How do we stop doing that? How do we figure out what's real?
Yeah.
So it's not just about, like, figuring out someone else's behavior. It's also about being aware of our own biases, right?
Absolutely.
And that takes me back to the Love Doc's advice about, remember, gathering data. Yeah, the data.
But how do we actually do that without turning into like a dating detective?
Yeah.
Like constantly searching for clues and reading into every little thing.
Yeah, you don't want to drive yourself crazy.
Exactly.
It's really about finding that balance, that sweet spot between healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, a little bit of that is a good thing,
Yeah.
but also being open-minded.
Okay, so how do we walk that line?
Well, I think the Love Doc said it best trust is earned, right? So instead of jumping to conclusions after one date, we need to pay attention to the bigger picture.
So we're talking about looking for patterns over time, right?
Exactly. Like, does what they say actually line up with what they do?
Consistency.
Yes, and it's not just about the things they say about themselves,
Right.
but how they talk about other people,
Interesting.
Like, are they respectful? Do they badmouth their exes?
Because those are pretty telling signs.
Right. It's like that old saying, you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat the waiter.
So true.
Those little things, they speak volumes.
Totally. Okay, but gathering data, it's not just about playing detective, right?
No, definitely not. The Love Doc also talks about how important communication is.
Which can be scary, but it's so important. So if something feels a little off, we shouldn't be afraid to say something.
Exactly. But, you don't have to be confrontational about it. It's more about just expressing your feelings and what you're noticing in a healthy way.
So, like, you could say something like, I had a really good time the other night, but I'm a little confused about it.
Exactly. Basically, you're creating a space for real, honest conversation.
Which is sometimes awkward, but so much better than just, constantly trying to guess what's going on.
100%. And you know what? This advice isn't just for dating. This is important for any relationship.
That's so true.
It's all about that balance. Observation, communication. Yeah. And honestly, you got to be okay with a little bit of mystery too, right?
Because relationships would be pretty boring if we had it all figured out.
Exactly. And people are complicated, right? We can't always be put into neat little boxes.
So true.
And sometimes the most unexpected things, they can lead to amazing places. Who knows, maybe this guy who's breaking all the first date stereotypes, maybe he actually is a purple unicorn.
Right. Maybe.
See?
That's what makes this whole thing so interesting.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it all,
Yeah.
Approach dating and honestly life in general with that sense of curiosity.
Yeah, I love that.
Because amazing things can happen when you're open to the unknown.
So well said. Okay, so to our listener and to everyone out there navigating the crazy world of dating, trust your gut, do a little data gathering, and don't be afraid to speak up. And if you ever find yourself at the chili parlor on a first date, let us know how it goes.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Love Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?